When you finally decide to stop operating in chaos, everything in your life begins to shift. Most people don't even realize how much confusion they're living in because it has become their norm. They wake up with no plan, carry yesterday's stress into today, say yes to everything, and then wonder why they feel overwhelmed, stuck, or spiritually disconnected. But confusion is not just a feeling, it's a barrier. It blocks your focus, your energy, your consistency, and most importantly, it blocks your ability to receive direction. When your life is cluttered with noise, distractions, and mixed priorities, you can't hear God clearly. You can't hear your own purpose clearly. You're moving, but you're not moving with intention. And movement without intention is just motion, not progress. Clarity is not a luxury, it's a spiritual advantage. It separates people who are constantly fighting the same battles from those who break through and evolve. You cannot expect blessings to flow into a life that has no structure, no order, and no discipline. Blessings require space. They require preparation. When your mind is scattered, opportunities will slip right past you because you don't have the capacity to recognize or manage them. Think of confusion as static on a radio. The message may already be there, but you'll never hear it until you tune the dial. Clarity is that tuning. It's the process of aligning your life with your values, your purpose, and your next level. Most people want change, but they don't want to do the necessary work to create order. They want God to bless their plans, but they haven't made any plan. They want God to open doors, but they haven't prepared themselves to walk through the doors they're praying for. You can't ask for elevation while holding on to habits that keep you scattered. Clarity demands sacrifice. It means being honest with yourself about what's no longer working. It means cutting off distractions, even if those distractions are people, routines, or mindsets you've carried for years. You can't elevate with everyone. You can't elevate with everything. Some things must go so better things can arrive. Clarity also requires courage. Confusion is comfortable because it lets you avoid decisions. If you don't choose a direction, you can't be wrong. If you don't commit, you can't fail. Chaos becomes a shield that protects you from accountability. But deep down, you know that as long as you remain confused, you remain the same. Growth begins the moment you stop hiding behind uncertainty and start taking ownership of your life. You weren't created to be lost. You weren't created to live in a fog of indecision. God designed you with intention, and intention requires clarity. When you get clear, everything becomes simpler. Not easier, simpler. You know what to say yes to and what to reject. You know where to put your time, your energy, your effort. You stop chasing everything and start building something. Your days begin to have meaning. Your actions begin to connect. Instead of living in reaction mode, responding to emergencies, problems, and distractions, you start living proactively. You begin creating your life instead of surviving it. Clarity creates confidence. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because you finally know who you are and what you're moving toward. You stop comparing yourself to others because you realize their journey has nothing to do with your destination. You stop doubting yourself because your vision becomes stronger than your fear. Confusion breeds insecurity, but clarity builds momentum. And once you have momentum, breakthroughs follow. This clarity also opens the spiritual channels in your life. You begin to feel guidance. You begin to see alignment. Opportunities that once looked invisible suddenly become obvious. You start to experience peace, not because your circumstances are perfect, but because your direction is. God can't bless confusion, but He can bless effort, discipline, focus, and obedience. When you move with clarity, you move in partnership with purpose. You move in partnership with God. The life you want is not hidden from you, it's hidden behind your confusion. Every time you eliminate clutter, remove distractions, get honest about your priorities, and take one deliberate step, you reveal more of the path ahead. Your next level is already prepared. The question is whether you are prepared to receive it. Chaos won't prepare you. Being busy won't prepare you. Only clarity will. When you choose clarity, you choose transformation. You choose growth. You choose alignment. And once you're aligned, your life can finally begin to change. When you finally get clear about who you are, what you want, and what God has called you to do, you open the door for elevation in a way confusion never could. Clarity is not just about having a plan, it's about creating the environment where God can move, guide, and bless you without obstruction. Most people pray for favor but live in a fog. They ask for blessings, breakthroughs, and opportunities, but their lives are cluttered with indecision, conflict, mixed priorities, and emotional chaos. And the truth is simple. God is not going to elevate a version of you that is unstable, unfocused, and uncertain. Elevation requires structure. Purpose requires order. Breakthrough requires a clear foundation. Imagine you're standing in front of a GPS, but you're not sure where you want to go. The system can't guide you, not because it doesn't have the ability, but because you haven't given it direction. That's how many people live spiritually. They want God to lead them somewhere, but they haven't decided on anything. They haven't clarified their values, their goals, their standards, or their direction. God can bless your work, but He cannot bless confusion. And confusion isn't just lack of clarity, it's lack of commitment. You can't elevate when you're halfway in and halfway out of your purpose. Getting clear is an act of faith. It's you saying, God, I'm ready for the next step, and I'm aligning my life so you can move. Clarity shows God you are serious. It shows you are prepared to handle what you've been praying for. Many people want promotions, but they don't want responsibility. They want success, but they aren't ready for discipline. They want influence, but they haven't developed character. Clarity aligns your internal world with the external blessings you're asking for. Without clarity, elevation would crush you. With clarity, elevation strengthens you. When you get clear, your actions begin to match your prayers. You stop moving in circles and start moving forward. Your decisions start reflecting your destiny instead of your distractions. Suddenly, you realize that certain habits don't fit your purpose anymore. Certain people don't fit your growth anymore. Certain environments don't match your next level. Clarity helps you stop forcing what God is trying to free you from. It opens your eyes to what's draining you, delaying you, or distracting you. Elevation comes when your life stops contradicting your goals. You can't ask for financial increase while living with no discipline. You can't ask for peace while entertaining chaos daily. You can't ask for purpose while avoiding the work required to step into it. When you get clear, your behavior aligns with your blessings. And alignment is what attracts elevation. God elevates people who are consistent, committed, and ready to carry responsibility. Clarity builds that readiness. One of the most powerful things clarity does is simplify your life. When you know what matters, you stop stressing about everything that doesn't. You stop wasting energy on battles that aren't yours. You stop trying to please everyone because your purpose becomes more important than their opinions. You stop seeking validation because clarity gives you identity. You stop doubting yourself because your direction becomes stronger than your fears. And once your energy is no longer scattered, you become unstoppable. Elevation also requires obedience. Sometimes clarity doesn't give you a full roadmap. It gives you the first step. And taking that step shows God you trust Him. People delay their leveling up because they are waiting for all the answers before they move. But clarity is not about knowing every detail. It's about knowing enough to begin. God fills the gaps once you start walking. When He sees your willingness to move with conviction instead of confusion, He accelerates your progress. The moment you get clear, you begin to attract resources, ideas, and relationships that align with your purpose. Things that once felt difficult suddenly feel manageable. Clarity creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. Progress invites elevation. But none of that happens until you stop living in mental and emotional fog. God cannot elevate you into a position you're too confused to see, too distracted to handle, or too inconsistent to maintain. Your next level requires a clearer version of you, a more disciplined you, a more intentional you, a more focused you. Elevation is already waiting, but confusion delays it. When you finally decide who you are and where you're going, God meets you at that decision and begins opening doors you thought were impossible. Clarity doesn't just change your mindset, it changes your life. And once you get clear, God can finally elevate you the way He always intended. Confusion is one of the most powerful forces working against your growth. And most people don't even realize how much damage it causes because it often shows up quietly. It shows up as indecision, procrastination, mixed emotions, scattered priorities, and inconsistent routines. Over time, this confusion becomes a wall, blocking progress, blocking direction, and ultimately blocking blessings. You can pray, you can hope, you can work hard, but if your life is filled with confusion, you will always be operating below your potential. God is a God of order, not chaos. Blessings flow where there is structure, alignment, and readiness. Confusion shuts down all three. When your life is confused, you cannot move with confidence. Every step feels uncertain. You doubt yourself, not because you lack ability, but because you lack clarity. That doubt drains your energy. It makes you second-guess opportunities. It makes you hesitate when you should act. Blessings require boldness, and confusion kills boldness. You can't step into what God has for you when you're constantly questioning whether you're even capable. Clarity strengthens your spirit. Confusion weakens your conviction, and weak conviction leads to weak results. Discipline is the weapon that destroys confusion. It brings structure to your days, intention to your actions, and consistency to your habits. Discipline doesn't wait for motivation. It creates progress through commitment. When your life is disciplined, you don't depend on how you feel. You depend on what you've committed to. And when you begin acting from commitment rather than emotion, you remove a massive gateway for confusion to enter. Confusion fills the life of anyone who lives without pattern, routine, or focus. When you have no structure, everything feels urgent. You spend your days reacting instead of building. You jump from task to task, distraction to distraction, never truly finishing what you start. This creates a sense of overwhelm, which turns into stress, which turns into burnout. And burnout makes you want to quit. Many people think they're unmotivated, but they're not. They're overwhelmed by confusion. Discipline brings order, and order brings peace. Blessings cannot thrive in a confused environment. Imagine having a bucket full of holes. No matter how much water you pour in, it never stays. That is what confusion does to blessings. God may send opportunities, ideas, connections, or resources, but because your life lacks structure, those blessings leak right out. You forget, you delay, you mismanage, or you simply don't recognize what you've been given. Discipline patches the holes. It prepares you to sustain what God gives you instead of losing it through inconsistency. Another way confusion blocks blessings is by keeping you attached to things that no longer fit your life. Confusion always keeps you stuck in the middle, half in, half out. Half committed to your purpose, half committed to your comfort, half hungry for change, half tied to old habits. Blessings require full commitment. You cannot receive something new while gripping tightly to what's old. Clarity tells you it's time to let go. Discipline gives you the strength to actually release it. Once you release the things that no longer serve your growth, you create space for blessings to enter. Confusion also clouds your spiritual vision. When your mind is scattered, you cannot hear God clearly. You can't distinguish between a distraction and a divine direction. You can't tell whether an opportunity is meant for you or meant to pull you away from your path. Discipline cleans the lens. It brings silence where there was noise, order where there was chaos, and focus where there was distraction. Many people think their prayers aren't being answered, but the truth is the answers are there. They're just drowned in confusion. Discipline makes you alert, aware, and spiritually aligned. The blessing you were praying for requires a version of you that is stable, focused, and trustworthy. God elevates people who can handle responsibility. Confusion makes you unpredictable. One day you're committed, the next day you're not. 1 week you're consistent, the next week you're overwhelmed. 1 month you're all in, the next month you're starting over. Discipline eliminates the need to restart. It builds habits that carry you even when motivation fades. It shows God and yourself that you are ready for more. The moment you choose discipline, your life shifts. You become intentional with your time. You eliminate distractions that once controlled you. You stop giving energy to things that don't support your purpose. Your actions begin to align with your goals instead of your emotions. And when alignment arrives, blessings know exactly where to go. Discipline creates stability. Stability creates clarity. Clarity creates opportunity. And opportunity leads directly to elevation. When you understand this, you stop praying for blessings without preparing for them. Instead of asking God, why aren't you blessing me? You start asking, what confusion in my life is blocking the blessing you've already prepared? That question changes everything. It leads you to organize your life, prioritize your goals, strengthen your habits, and elevate your mindset. And once you do that, blessings can finally flow, because you are no longer the confused version of yourself trying to receive them. You become the disciplined version of yourself, ready to carry them. Confusion blocks blessings. Discipline opens the door. And once that door is open, nothing can stop the transformation that follows. Most people don't realize how much power they lose simply because they're moving in too many directions at the same time. They wake up with good intentions, they want to grow, they want to succeed, they want to improve their lives, but their energy is scattered across a dozen different pursuits. They're chasing opportunities that don't align, juggling responsibilities that don't matter, entertaining distractions that drain their focus, and saying yes to anything that gives the illusion of progress. But being busy is not the same as being productive. Trying everything is not the same as committing to something. And when your life is divided into 1,000 pieces, you can't expect your results to be strong, consistent, or meaningful. A focused life is a powerful life. A distracted life is a frustrated one. The moment you stop trying to go in every direction, you gain the clarity and strength to accelerate in the direction that matters. Think of your energy like sunlight. When it's spread out, it warms. But when it's concentrated through a magnifying glass, it burns. That's what happens when you focus. You stop warming your goals and you start igniting them. You stop dreaming about change and start producing it. But the challenge is that distractions often look like opportunities. It's easy to think, if I try everything, something will work. But that mindset keeps you in cycles of trial with no transformation. Every time you switch directions, you lose momentum. Every time you start over, you waste the progress you already made. And every new idea pulls you further away from mastering the one thing that could change everything. Success doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right things consistently. And you can't do anything consistently if you're torn between too many paths. One of the biggest reasons people stay stuck is because they haven't learned how to say no. They say yes to every request because they don't want to disappoint people. They say yes to every opportunity because they're afraid they'll miss out. They say yes to every task because they don't trust themselves to prioritize what truly matters. But every yes has a cost. Every time you say yes to something unimportant, you are saying no to your purpose. Saying yes to distractions means saying no to progress. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people know what their priority is. They just avoid it because it's the one thing that requires discipline. Finding one direction doesn't mean giving up on ambition. It means giving your goals a lane to breathe. It means choosing what aligns with your purpose, not what gives you temporary excitement. It means going deep instead of wide. Depth builds mastery, width builds confusion. When you focus deeply on one direction, your vision, your craft, your calling, you move from being average at many things to being exceptional at the thing that matters most. And exceptional is what opens doors, attracts opportunities, and creates real transformation. Once you commit to one direction, everything in your life becomes simpler. Decisions become easier because you're no longer comparing endless options. You're measuring everything against your purpose. If it doesn't support your direction, it doesn't deserve your energy. You conserve time because you're not jumping between tasks that pull you in different directions. You conserve emotional energy because you're not torn between conflicting goals. You conserve mental strength because you're not spinning in circles wondering what to do next. Focus creates peace, and peace creates power. The truth is you don't need more time, more resources, or more opportunities. You need more alignment. You need to identify the path that leads to your true calling and walk it without hesitation. When you do that, you begin to experience momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in personal development. Small actions begin to compound. Progress that used to take months suddenly happens in weeks. Results that once felt impossible begin to surface. Not because you're working harder, but because you're no longer divided. You're unified. And a unified person is unstoppable. When you focus on one direction, you also remove a huge amount of stress from your life. Most of the pressure people feel doesn't come from their workload. It comes from the mental strain of juggling too many identities at once. They're trying to be everything for everybody all at once. But peace comes from simplicity. Growth comes from prioritization. When you stop scattering your purpose across multiple paths, you begin to feel grounded. You begin to feel aligned. You begin to feel like your life is finally moving forward instead of sideways, and spiritually, focus is a sign of maturity. God doesn't bless confusion, and He doesn't bless divided loyalty. When you choose a direction, commit to it, and organize your life around it, you show God that you're ready for elevation. You show that you're trustworthy with purpose. When you stop chasing distractions, you create space for divine guidance. When your path becomes clear, your blessings become clearer too. At some point, you must decide that your energy is too valuable to waste. Your purpose is too important to divide. Your destiny is too big to chase everything and accomplish nothing. Choose one direction, commit to it, protect it, and watch your life transform with a speed and power that confusion could never produce. Purpose is not something you stumble into. It's something you prepare for, and preparation requires order. Many people want to live a meaningful, impactful, purpose-driven life, yet their daily habits are filled with excuses, inconsistency, and emotional chaos. They pray for clarity, but their environment is disorganized. They ask for elevation, but their routines are unstable. They want transformation, yet they continue operating with the same habits that keep them stuck. Your purpose cannot thrive in a life that is cluttered, unfocused, and undisciplined. It requires order, direction, and intentionality. It requires a version of you that is aligned, self-controlled, and committed to growth, not a version of you that is constantly creating excuses for why things aren't different. Excuses are one of the biggest obstacles between you and the life you're meant to live. Excuses allow you to outsource responsibility and convince yourself that you're doing the best you can when deep down you know you're not giving even a fraction of what you're capable of. Excuses feel comfortable because they protect your ego. They let you avoid accountability. They allow you to blame circumstances instead of confronting the truth. But excuses also trap you. They keep you repeating the same cycles year after year. They make you believe you're making progress when you're actually just moving in place. Purpose demands truth. It demands self-reflection. It demands you acknowledge what's not working and have the courage to change it. You cannot walk in purpose while holding on to excuses. They are incompatible. You cannot discover your calling while living in chaos. The noise will drown out your clarity. Order is the foundation that supports purpose. When your mind is organized, your heart is clear, and your environment is structured, everything that once felt confusing starts to make sense. You start recognizing what aligns with you and what doesn't. Begin identifying what is a distraction and what is essential. Purpose is not accidental, it's intentional. You have to build habits that support your future, not your comfort. You need discipline, routines, and standards. Purpose grows in predictable systems, not unpredictable emotional swings. Every successful person who walks in their calling has one thing in common. They built order around their life to support their purpose. They didn't wait for motivation. They didn't depend on inspiration. They created a framework that kept them focused even on days when they didn't feel like showing up. Excuses are the opposite of that framework. They give you permission to break promises to yourself. They justify inconsistency. They reward procrastination. And once you allow excuses to take root, they grow quickly. You start excusing your lateness, your lack of discipline, your poor choices, and eventually your lost opportunities. Purpose requires you to break that pattern before it hardens into a lifestyle. The moment you stop making excuses and start creating order, your life begins to shift. You start waking up with intention instead of confusion. You start making decisions based on your future instead of your feelings. You begin to notice how much mental space you gain when you're no longer overwhelmed by disorganization. And as clarity increases, your purpose becomes louder. It's not that your calling wasn't speaking before, you just couldn't hear it through the noise. Order also strengthens your character. Purpose cannot rest on a weak foundation. If you cannot manage your time, you cannot manage opportunity. If you cannot manage your emotions, you cannot manage responsibility. If you cannot manage your habits, you cannot manage the calling God has placed on your life. Purpose elevates you, but order stabilizes you. Without stability, elevation becomes dangerous. God will not put you in a position you are too disorganized to sustain. And then there's the truth we all face. It's easier to live in excuses than to create change. Change requires effort. It requires letting go of comfort and stepping into uncertainty. It requires admitting that you could be doing more, and that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is the doorway to purpose. Excuses keep you comfortable, but they keep you limited. Purpose pulls you forward, but it requires you to leave old versions of yourself behind. When you decide to eliminate excuses, you reclaim your power. You start seeing results because you are no longer sabotaging yourself. You feel lighter because you've removed the emotional weight of avoidance. You feel stronger because discipline begins replacing doubt. Purpose comes alive in a life that is structured, focused, and intentional. And once you create that order, things that once felt impossible start aligning effortlessly. Your purpose is waiting on you. But it cannot step into a life full of excuses. It cannot grow in confusion. It cannot flourish in disorder. It thrives in structure, clarity, and intention. When you remove excuses and build order, you don't just change your habits, you change your entire destiny. Clarity doesn't just help you think better. It transforms the way you pray, the way you plan, and the way you pursue your goals. Prayer without clarity is often just emotion. But prayer with clarity becomes direction, alignment, and conviction when you know exactly what you're asking for, exactly what you're working toward, and exactly what you're committed to changing. Your prayers shift from vague hopes into powerful requests backed by intention. And intention is what activates movement. When you get clear, your spiritual life strengthens because your focus strengthens. You stop praying for everything and start praying for what truly matters. You stop asking for generic blessings and start partnering with God on specific goals, specific breakthroughs, and specific areas of growth. Clarity brings confidence because it gives you a target. When you know what you're aiming at, you move differently. You act with more certainty. You stop hesitating. You stop doubting every decision. Instead of wondering whether you're on the right path, you start building the path. Instead of questioning whether you deserve success, you start preparing for it. Clarity eliminates the confusion that once slowed you down and replaces it with a sense of purpose that fuels your spirit. People often think confidence comes from talent or experience, but true confidence comes from clarity, knowing who you are, where you're going, and why you're moving in that direction. A clear mind also makes faith easier. When you aren't drowning in distractions, you can hear direction better. You can feel guidance stronger. You recognize when something aligns with your purpose and when it doesn't. Confusion makes everything feel like a sign, but clarity helps you discern. It helps you separate your emotions from your calling. It helps you avoid detours disguised as opportunities. When your spirit is aligned with your vision, you start noticing how God has been guiding you all along. You just weren't in a mental state to see it. Clarity also changes the way you work. When you have a focused vision, your effort becomes intentional instead of random. You don't waste time on tasks that don't matter. You don't let people distract you with meaningless drama. You don't allow fear to convince you that you need to try everything before committing. You know the mission, you know the direction, and because of that, your grind becomes more disciplined. You show up consistently, not out of pressure, but out of purpose. Work becomes purposeful instead of overwhelming because clarity simplifies what once felt complicated. One of the most powerful things clarity does is reduce emotional noise. Most people feel stuck, not because they lack ability, but because their emotions are cluttered with doubt, insecurity, and fear of failure. When you get clear, those emotions lose their power. You no longer let your feelings decide your future. You start making decisions based on your calling, not your comfort. You stop reacting to life and start architecting it. And that shift alone turns your mindset into a tool instead of a battlefield. When clarity enters your life, your relationships change too. You stop tolerating people who drain your spirit. You stop entertaining conversations that don't support your growth. You stop surrounding yourself with people who keep you small, insecure, or confused. Clarity helps you identify who is aligned with your journey and who is distracting you from it. It gives you the strength to create boundaries, the wisdom to recognize unhealthy patterns, and the courage to let go of what no longer fits your future. Over time, clarity transforms into momentum. And momentum is what turns vision into reality. When you know your purpose and your direction, every small action compounds. You begin to move faster, not because you're rushing, but because confusion is no longer slowing you down. Doors open because you're finally walking toward them. Opportunities appear because your energy is aligned with your goals. Resources become available because you're moving with intention instead of hesitation. Spiritually, clarity invites partnership. When you take responsibility for your direction, God begins guiding your steps with more precision. Your effort meets His favor. Your discipline meets His timing. Your focus meets His blessing. And that combination is unstoppable. You become aligned. Mind, spirit, actions, habits, and purpose, all moving in the same direction. That's when your life begins to transform at a level confusion could never reach. When you get clear, prayer becomes powerful, focus becomes sharp, energy becomes purposeful, discipline becomes natural, and blessings become recognizable. Clarity doesn't just improve your life, it multiplies your life. It shifts you into a higher gear, a higher mindset, and a higher spiritual alignment. And once clarity takes hold, your results begin to reflect the strength of your focus. Your life becomes a testimony of what happens when you stop living in confusion and start living with intention.